Peace, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of the File Playland. As always, I'm your File Player, making another video regarding this coward, Errol Spence. Um, and the reason I'm calling him that is because he gets little to no flack from the hardcore boxing community regarding his ducking bullshit. I mean, like the fact that they want to throw out the requisite of Terrence Bud Crawford having to fight PBC fighters who have shown unwillingness to fight him. It's a cop out. But let me get into it though, because I mean, Errol Spence at this point is using more of way more of ducking tactics than Anthony Joshua, who's also another duck. When it came to Wilder, but Errol Spence is using more ducking tactics than Anthony Joshua ever did for a lot lesser fights. When you're talking about the likes of Danny Garcia, who he didn't have to fight, and people say, "Oh, well, that was a mandatory." Well, it wasn't a mandatory when Danny Garcia hopped into the ring after Errol Spence beat Sean Porter. It wasn't a mandatory that day, and it seemed like that fight was already set in stone following that day. Danny Garcia was made a mandatory after Danny Garcia jumped into the ring. Fight that didn't need to happen. Danny Garcia has no tangible or memorable wins in welterweight, with the exception of beating Robert Guerrero for a vacant welterweight WBC belt. And now, seemingly, Errol Spence is fast tracking a fight towards Ordenis Ugas. And funnily enough, Ordenis Ugas also won a vacant belt, same belt, WBC belt or WBA belt. I'm sorry, from beating Abel Ramos, and Abel Ramos is a nobody boxer, and Ordenis Ugas honestly is a nobody boxer too. You're talking about Ugas, who's already bagged 4 losses. Um, you know, uh, and just because he's on the PBC side of things currently, I mean, all of a sudden now he deserves all the fanfare because he you can make an argument that he beat Sean Porter like when they fought. I mean, what's that do for me? And the fact that he won that vacant WBA belt by beating Abel Ramos, another dude that with the litany of no name bouts, like who is Abel Ramos beat of sustenance? I mean, like uh, prior to him fighting Ugas, he fought nobody really. Like I mean, the only like decent names on it, Jamal James, Barashnik. I mean, you can't, and that was a little while ago. I mean, like I don't have it in front of me, but the when he fought Barashnik, and that was probably like 3 years ago, and Barashnik is a nobody now. He was a nobody then, you know. But it's the same crap, like and very likely, I mean, for the guys who have nothing bad to say about PBC, because like all of a sudden, like in the last like 3 years, that's become our religion, like to where like you dissing PBC is all of us is automatically you loving Bob Arum and you loving Eddie Hearn. Like I hate Bob Arum, I hate the PBC, I hate Top Rank, I hate Eddie Hearn. I don't like none of these dudes. None of them are your friends, and they're not my friend either. Like so whatever they're giving to you that very moment or that very day is the only relationship you should have with them. It shouldn't be no long term shit. Like because nobody wants to see or wanted to see a Danny Garcia fight. I didn't want to see a Mikey Garcia fight against Errol Spence or a Danny Garcia fight, and I definitely don't want to see a or Dennis Ugas fight because I don't even know what Ugas looks like unless I Google him. I always use that corny joke, but it's true. You don't know what Ugas looks like. All of a sudden, in the past too, it's always been hard to market these Cuban fighters, supposedly, and that's unfortunate because a lot of them are real technically savvy and are good fighters. But now you have the same instance of a Cuban fighter with almost a handful of losses already, 4 losses. Um, and I'm pretty sure they're gonna charge pay per view. I mean, they're gonna try to make that a pay per view fight. Um, and they're racing towards that fight. Errol Spence, who's already like in his 30s, we've already been talking about him fighting Terrence Bud Crawford before Terrence Bud Crawford even got in the division. Terrence Bud Crawford has been a champion in the welterweight for 3 years, and you barely get a mention from Errol Spence about Crawford. He's pulling that bitch shit when Bud Crawford was in his last fight, saying why is he here? Like that's two birds in one stone. You just won a fight, and the guy who everybody wants you to fight is already in the crowd. You should have been on some call out shit right there. But that never happens from Errol Spence. You never hear Errol Spence talking about Bud Crawford as if he wants to fight him, but with maybe like a bitch ass tweet like twice a year, maybe. Errol Spence is a goddamn girl. Like, you guys gotta face it. And like whether he was bred that way, I mean, like from Jump Street, or like if he's turning that way because of business, it does nothing for you as a boxing fan. Like, don't defend it. You should only want one fight from him, and that's Terrence Bud Crawford. But now, like, they're giving you a soft blow, like, or like letting you know subtly, like, that he's gonna fight Dennis Ugas, and nobody wants that fight. Sorry, guys, I had to get the door. But as I was saying, I mean, like, the more that we accept this bullshit, like, the more it's that they're gonna give it to us. And the sad thing is that I don't even care like whether you accept it or not. It's that it's being endorsed by tons of fans. Like, I mean, nobody, at any point, like, what is Sean a victory over Sean Porter for Terrence Bud Crawford, which is the fight that a lot of fans are propping as a threshold that Bud Crawford has to cross before he fights Errol Spence Jr. Something that never happened in boxing, like with the exception of one case, which was Anthony Joshua when they were trying to push Dillian White to fight Wilder for as a requisite, like for Wilder to get a fight against Anthony Joshua. And I actually agreed he should have done that, like in hindsight, you know. But with Wilder winning against Dillian White back then, or even in some cases now, I mean, it would have been a strike across the bow into the UK for Wilder. I mean, like, but what does Bud Crawford beating Sean Porter do for Bud Crawford? Zero. I mean, it's a little bit better competition than what he's already fought. But you also have a lot of these guys from PBC, including Porter, that have shown a lot of resistance against fighting Bud Crawford. They showed no commitment to wanting to fight Bud Crawford. And if somebody comes with like some bullshit, oh, he was calling the smoke, or he wanted the smoke because he said this on Twitter, go fuck yourself. Because I like, frankly, like and Bud Crawford is guilty of that stuff too. A semblance of a call out isn't a call out. Somebody mentioning a fighter they want to fight at every turn, that's calling somebody out. Like, and in hindsight, and I'm not defending Dillian White because I think Dillian White is a cheater and just a trash boxer. But Dillian White was doing that very thing when it came to Wilder, as far as calling him out. Dillian White made a career out of doing it. That riveted up interest in Wilder, Dillian White, and Anthony Joshua. Like, it gained a lot of traction. But the fact that no PBC fighter really called out Bud Crawford, except in passing, maybe, or the fact that Errol Spence never calls out Bud Crawford, ever, like in passing, maybe. And this is supposed to lead up to a mega fight when neither fighter, Bud Crawford or Errol Spence, really calls each other out or shows any like real want to fight each other. It's a recipe for disaster, and I hope they both lose. To be frank, fuck them both. Like, I hope that, but more Errol Spence. But I hope they both hurt themselves or some shit. Like, and for as a form of divine justice in a sense, because these dudes are what's wrong with boxing. The fact that like you act like a smug bitch like Errol Spence, like, oh well, I'll do, like, I'll clean up my side of the street, or as soon as he gets to the division, I'm gonna take that belt when he becomes a champion. He became a champion his first day in the division against Horn. I mean, like, Horn is a nobody at the end of the day, but he's a champion. He has one of the 4 belts. But you've shown uh, real enthusiasm for fighting Mikey Garcia, who wasn't in your division. You got nothing for fighting him except numbers, somewhat, and numbers based largely off of Mikey Garcia, not you. You fought Danny Garcia for no reason. You got nothing for fighting him. You shown a real streamline or fast tracking fights with them two guys when it came to negotiating with them. You've been dicking around with this Bud Crawford fight for over 3 years. People were talking about fighting Errol Spence and Bud Crawford having a match before Bud Crawford got to the division. That was a fantasy match 2 years before Bud Crawford got to the welterweight division. And what Bud and Crawford's been a champion at the welterweight division and in the welterweight division for going on 3 years now. And if you had 10 call-outs from Errol Spence, that's a lot, or that's saying a lot. You could probably take away two from there and equal it out to 8 call-outs from Errol Spence. Errol Spence is a bum ass fighter, bro. Like, period. He's what's wrong with boxing, and I hope, like, if the PBC crumbles because of them having to pay for a fight, like for these fights, like Ugas and Errol Spence, or for Danny Garcia and Errol Spence, and they're taking losses on that, and it fast tracks PBC falling apart, then so be it. I hope all boxing promotions fall apart. I hope at some point that these fighters getting 100 grand, and they're overly motivated to fight each other. Now you're getting prospects that are fighting twice a year or 3 times a year tops. Fighters that are 19 years old, 20 years old. Because that's where they should be fighting 6 times a year. They're too scared like to take risk, or they're too afraid to look like vulnerable. So you get like these lulls in activity. Like what PBC fights are happening from here to June that you're excited about? Zero. There's nothing happening. There's nothing happening in boxing from here to June that you should be excited about. It's all trash, and PBC is at the helm of it because they have all these fighters like under the PBC banner, hundreds, and they ain't even fighting each other. Like when PBC was announced, and a lot of people had bad shit to say about the PBC. I thought that the people that had bad shit to say about the PBC, a lot of it was racially motivated. Frankly, I give you that, but I thought that to spite the detractors or to spite the haters, that the PBC was just gonna give us these fast track a bunch of like great fights off the rip. But now PBC has not given a shit since the history of PBC, or since PBC's gotten off the ground as its own entity. And boxing has done the same thing. When the biggest promotion is doing that, or when the promotion that's bigger than any promotion in history is slowing down these fights and giving you little fights here and there and charging you for it at that, everybody else is following suit. Everybody's making these fights that are like real lackluster into making it seem like they're mega events. And now in hindsight, you can't even diss Anthony Joshua for fighting Povetkin, and not saying that's a super fight. Is Povetkin a bigger fight than Ugas versus fucking Errol Spence? Yes. Is Povetkin fighting Anthony Joshua a bigger fight than Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence? Yes. So I mean, like, as far as like all this shit that we used to say about Anthony Joshua, I mean, it relates 100% more, or 100 times more, to Errol Spence. Errol, like Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn were propping up Dillian White to fight Wilder as a hurdle for Wilder to fight AJ. Errol Spence and the PBC are doing the same shit, propping up Porter, who's coming off losses, to fight Bud Crawford, so that Bud Crawford could be blessed or bestowed an opportunity to fight Errol Spence. And in that case, like I said, at least the Wilder beating or fighting Dillian White would have gained them some traction in the UK market. What does Porter fighting Errol Spence do for Porter fighting Bud Crawford do for Bud Crawford? Not much. I mean, like, it's not like like nobody ever says like, I'm gonna pause my weekend because Sean Porter is gonna fight whoever. Unless Sean Porter is fighting another champion, like, you don't give a shit. Sean Porter has no semblance in Ohio, the city where he's from. He lives in Vegas, has no semblance there. Like, Sean Porter lives like a regular ass dude. He did an interview in his backyard one time. That shit looked like a regular ass house. My yard is probably nice in that his shit. Like, these dudes are like thousandaires, and like, you want to like prop him up as like some sort of well, that, they have to fight, like, he has to fight this dude that's, and I give props to Sean Porter, but I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, are they gonna talk about Bud Crawford beating Sean Porter in the barbershop the following day? No. They gotta Google these dudes. They gotta Google Bud Crawford. God damn it! Like, they don't even know what any of these dudes look like, and nobody's. You know, and we're gonna get a bunch of nobodies unless somebody comes out on top, and somebody, which is only Bud Crawford and Errol Spence at this time, beat each other. And they're happy to be nobody so long as they keep getting paid. So long as you keep charging for fights like Ugas versus Errol Spence. And another thing too, there's no, like, people say, oh well, he made 300,000 for fighting 300,000 million 300,000 pay per view buys for fighting Danny Garcia. If somebody could give me tangible proof, not what was reported by some fucking PBC lackey, that Danny Garcia and Errol Spence sold more than 250,000, I'll put cash up out of my own pocket, G money. If you could give me tangible proof that they made that much money in that fight, they ain't make that much. If that fight sold over 200,000, it was a miracle. I don't even think it sold 200,000. And what do you think Errol Spence versus Ugas is gonna sell? 40K probably. Nobody's gonna buy that shit. Only lackeys are gonna buy that. If you really have to have nothing to do to put your life on hold and pay for Errol Spence versus Ugas fight. That's one of the worst fights as far as on a championship level in history. You got Ugas, who literally won that belt in a vacancy, which was probably followed by a few paper bags of money from the PBC to the WBA, and Errol Spence, who's fought no one in his career and was given these belts. Another thing too, and a lot of people bitched about the fact that Bud Crawford didn't beat people that they thought were of any semblance to become undisputed at 140. Bud Crawford's victories at 140 blow out anything that Errol Spence done at 140 147. Period. I mean, and career wise, I mean, but Crawford's already beat Indongo. Indongo was fucking propped up to be the shit when Crawford fought him. I mean, he hasn't done shit since then, but when before they fought, Ndongo was a highly respected fighter. Gamboa was a highly respected fighter. Ricky Burns, Postal, Horn. I mean, like, a lot of people want to say, yeah, he didn't beat Pacquiao, but Horn gave Pacquiao all hell, and he was gifted a win, no doubt. But better than anything, than most of what Errol Spence has done. Felix Diaz was no joke when Bud fought him. And I'm not saying that like that, but what like the fights that I'm listing off aren't like great fights either. They're pretty trash too. But like when compared to Errol Spence's fight, you can't you can't blow up like Errol Spence's accomplishments as if they're otherworldly. Everything that Errol Spence has accomplished, somebody else already did. Somebody else already beat Sean Porter when Errol Spence fought him, and with Kell Brook. And somebody already beat Kell Brook when Errol Spence fought him, which was Triple G. Danny Garcia already got beat by Sean Porter. Mikey Garcia, small guy, who was fighting at 135, 140. Took a long time off in his career. Didn't look good at 140. As far as Mikey Garcia didn't have an astounding performance at 140, let alone an astounding victory at 140. But Errol Spence fast tracks a fight to fight him because supposedly Mikey Garcia said in a few interviews that he wanted to fight Errol Spence. Bud Crawford's been saying he wants to fight you for fucking half a decade nearly, or that's a fight at least the fans want for nearly half a decade. When are you gonna fight him? Never. Now they're making it seem like that if he beats what he puts the tweet out. Oh, we'll see who's holding up when I get this third belt against Ugas. When he gets that third belt against Ugas, Errol Spence is gonna say, "Oh well, since I got three belts, I should be getting 25." And a bunch of dick riders are gonna be saying like, that he should be getting 25%, like as far as Bud Crawford, and he's lucky if even gets that. Like a bunch of dick pullers, fucking entourage motherfuckers, bro. You got like, I can't stand this shit too. Like you guys act like you're part of these boxers' entourage when they would literally piss on you while you go back to your fucking job, like drying off like fucking like cars in the last step of the car wash, like and then you guys are out here like defending them, like these dudes are down with you, like how ridiculous like boxing has become, and that's why I'm tuning out of the sport. And I thank God every day that I didn't curse my son with liking boxing. Boxing's trash, and these dudes are at the helm of making the sport trash. I don't give a shit about any fighter. I give a shit about boxing, and I'm giving less of a shit about boxing because bitch ass fighters like Errol Spence Jr. Let me know what you guys think with that. I'm out. Fuck Errol Spence.